I'm Tashima Jones, and I truly believe personal development and intention lead each and every one of us to our inner greatness. I am so grateful your journey has led you all the way here. Welcome to LifeClub with me, Tashima Jones. Welcome to another installment of Life Club with me, Tashima Jones. Super excited as always to have you tuning in. Today we are discussing depression, anxiety, and the soul. And if you are an avid listener of Life Club, you already know when we know the definition of a thing, we are better equipped to using it properly. So we're going to start with a few. Up first is depression. Depression is defined as this concept of pressing down, and pressing itself means to exert continual physical force on an object. Now, anxiety means to choke, it literally means to take breath away. And last but not least is the soul, which is rooted in this idea of blowing. It means to blow, and it's closely related to the word spirit, which means breath. Now, when we consider the soul being this concept of blowing and the spirit being this concept of breath, and we mix all of that in a pot with depression and anxiety, what we get is the suppression of breathing. We get this concept of a thing taking life away, and that's truly what depression and anxiety do. They either keep you trapped in the past, unable to move forward, or worried so much about the future that you're panicking in the present moment. And what we have to recognize and consider is that these two human conditions are stemmed in three key areas: our thought life, our experiences, and ultimately what we know. So let's start with our thoughts. If you are an avid listener of Life Club, you already know that thoughts are things, and we have two systems from which we derive our thoughts from. I always say that we don't necessarily create thoughts. Thoughts are simply revealed to us in plenty of ways. Again, it's usually from exposure and what we experience. So when you think about the two systems of thought, you have the system of life, and then you have the system of the knowledge of good and evil. And the interesting about the system of the knowledge of good and evil is that it doesn't always come back to this space of truth. And truth is where we get life from. And truth is not necessarily found in good and evil. Truth is truth. So we always have to be mindful of how we are choosing, how we're using our power of free will to choose and to pick the thoughts that we will plant within our soul, within our mind, within our consciousness, and then farm and produce the seeds of those thoughts through our meditation. So once again, when we recognize that the soul is this living, lively place of consciousness, and we recognize thoughts as things and we perceive them as seeds, we are then able to recognize that whatever we choose to meditate on, whatever thought we choose to meditate on, and it's similar to the process of pregnancy. You have those trimesters, and in each trimester, the child is being formed and being molded until eventually that child is birthed into the five sensory realm. So once again, when we recognize thoughts as things and we perceive them as seeds, and when we recognize that our soul is this space where life really germinates and is molded, and life is nurtured, we are then able to see that if I take this thought, aka this seed, and I implant it in the womb of my soul, I'm eventually going to give birth to whatever fruit this seed produces. And that's why we have to be so mindful of the system in which we choose our thoughts from, because every thought is not ours to give birth to. So now let's dig into our experiences. Oftentimes, experience is a teacher. But the tricky thing about those experiences is how we perceive it. We have to understand that trauma itself is not based on the event or the experience as much as it is based on how the person going through it is perceiving it and taking it in. For example, 100 people can go through the same event and come out with 100 different perspectives. And once again, that's linked back to our thought life and the foundation or the philosophy that we have towards life. It truly allows us to see things in certain ways that may differ from the people around us. So once again, our experiences also add to us coming into this place of depression or anxiety. And the amazing thing about our experiences is that they are oftentimes these one-time events or periods of time. And the danger in not healing from those traumatic events is that you can continue to duplicate the same traumatic event over and over and over again if you aren't brought to this space of healing. And we're going to dig a little deeper into how we actually heal from those traumatic experiences. But I really want to drive this point home is that sometimes we are reliving the traumatic experiences in our life so much so that it brings us into a state of depression or it causes us to be anxious. And either way, it's preventing us from living in the present moment. And last but not least, what we know is so powerful in how we see life. It's powerful in how we choose our thoughts, and it's powerful in how we perceive our experiences. And the five sensory self comes to know things through their experiences versus coming to know things through truth and through light. And the process of coming into truth is a process I call spiritual rehab. It's reconnecting with your spirit as well as spirit. It is being transparent, aka so light that truth can pass through it. Because when you know and you understand a thing, you are better equipped to using it properly. And oftentimes we are moving in and out of life, not truly knowing who we are, not truly knowing purpose, not truly understanding what life is about, not fully grasping the concept of life itself. And that is so imperative and it's so important because what you know allows you to perceive events a certain way. It allows you and it almost enables you and gives you this power to use your free will to choose your thoughts wisely and to choose your thoughts properly. So once again, we are discussing depression, anxiety, and the soul, the concept of, or I want to say the state of being of depression is to be pressed down. And this idea of pressing means to continually exert physical force on an object. Anxiety means to choke. It literally means to take breath away. And the soul itself means to blow, closely related to spirit, which means to breathe. So when you mix all of those things into a pot, the state of being depressed only presses the life out of you, and the state of being anxious or experiencing anxiety only chokes you from moving forward. It stagnates you from breathing. So the soul itself is the center of those two things. And when we recognize that the soul is where life is, the spirit is where life is, the spirit is where breath is actually existing, we have to recognize the importance of guarding our souls and guarding our spirits from the things that try to depress or cause our soul to be anxious. Now, dealing with these concepts or states of being depressed and anxious. First is prevention. I think oftentimes we wait too late to start to act on these thoughts and these feelings of depression, so much so that we have to do much more work to get ourselves out of it instead of simply preventing it. And I really want to drive this point home that depression and anxiety are human conditions, and they are diseases of the soul. They are not necessarily based on the five sensory self or the physical being. While they impact the physical being is not the foundation of where these two things start and originate. It's truly a dis-ease of the soul that manifests itself physically. So once we get over that hurdle of understanding what these two states of being truly are, we are then able to move into the space of awareness, being aware of how you feel, of your thought process. Just being conscious of that alone is the gateway to freedom, because once again, when we don't understand what we are experiencing, it's harder for us to actually find the solution. So being aware of it and being okay within yourself to actually share that, number one, with yourself and spirit, and then share it with someone that you can actually trust. So once we go past this space of awareness, we are then moving into this space of acknowledgement, just acknowledging the hurt, the pain, the confusing thoughts, the thoughts that may not be pure or noble of good report. When we acknowledge those things, it's a form of release. And to release a thing is to let something go. And the amazing thing about releasing something is that sometimes we get caught up in what we're letting go of versus what letting go of does for us. And when we let go of a thing that's weighing us down, we are truly freeing ourselves. We're lifting that burden off of us. The interesting thing about depression is that it comes with this concept of sadness. And sadness means to weigh down. It means to be full. It means to be enough. And that is truly the feeling we get when we experience this concept of depression. We become sad, we become lethargic, we become weighed down with so much emotion that we are literally blowing, like this, our soul is literally being prevented from blowing, being prevented from breathing, being prevented from living life. And on that same note, this state of being anxious comes with this concept of panic. And the interesting thing about panic is that it's rooted in this idea of this Greek deity who would cause unreasonable fear and chaos amongst people in large spaces or in lonely spaces. And that's so important, and it's so vital for us to truly understand that the root of this concept of panic itself is to cause unreasonable fear. And that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is looking way too far in the future and expecting a negative report, so much so that it's preventing you in your present moment to literally breathe. Ooh, let's just take a selah on that. It is so important and so vital for us to truly understand that depression and anxiety are states of being. They are dis-eases of the soul that eventually impact the five sensory self or the physical body. So when we recognize that it stems from this place called the soul, which embodies our consciousness and it embodies our thought life, we can start there in that space of dealing with the issues that have manifested themselves in the natural or have impacted the five sensory self. So dealing with the thoughts, and the preventative measures is choosing from the system of life, choosing thoughts from the system of life that bear good fruit, that bear profitable fruit. Because if you take a thought from the system of good and evil or the low vibrational thought waves, you are going to bear fruit to a thing that you may not necessarily want to eat. So starting in your thought life and starting with preventative measures. Now, If you find yourself in this state of depression or anxiety, you always have to start with the breath. Because if you find yourself in this state and you feel the presence of sadness or you feel the presence of panic, you have already meditated on the thought too long. So start with the breath. Remember, your soul means to blow, spirit means to breath. So when we take those deep breaths, we allow the presence of spirit to manifest itself. I feel that. We allow our souls to breathe and to live. It gives us this moment to disconnect from the chaos and recenter and realign ourselves. And alignment is so important because it brings wholeness. Oftentimes, our emotions are in one place, our thoughts are in another, and our body is wherever we find ourselves. But when we breathe, we allow ourselves to get back into alignment with our mind, our spirit, our soul, and our five sensory self, all standing as one, all being united. And that's where you find wholeness. See, wholeness when it comes to the human being is about you being in agreement with spirit, with soul, and with body. Too often, we are making decisions that are not aligned with what we feel in our core. We make decisions with our bodies that don't necessarily align with our emotions. We make decisions with our emotions that don't necessarily align with our spirit, but we have to make these choices and these decisions towards life as an entire whole human being. So taking that breath really gives you the opportunity to become aligned with yourself and with spirit. So if you find yourself in these states of depression or anxiety, it is so important and so vital for you to take a deep breath. And that's why you find that in so many teachings and in so many spaces of counseling, so forth and so on. Bringing yourself back to yourself is one breath away. So you take that breath and then you start to consider your thoughts. You start to consider your experiences, and then you start to consider what you know. And that is truly how you move forward. And this can be a daily practice. It can be a moment by moment practice, because how many of you have experienced certain highs and bouts of happiness, and then out of nowhere you are feeling down and you're feeling sad and you're not really sure of why? You always have to reconnect to your last thought, reconnect to the experiences that you've had, and more importantly, reconnect to what you know, because what you know will truly define and determine where you go. And that's why it's so important that what you know is linked to that system of truth, because truth never changes. So prevention is an issue of choosing proper, profitable thoughts, choosing thoughts from the system of life itself. When you choose those thoughts that bear good fruit, that bear profitable fruit, you will find yourself reaping the rewards emotionally and in your relationships and even physically from those thoughts that you chose. And if you find yourself experiencing or being in the middle of depression or anxiety, remember to take a deep breath and realign yourself with spirit, and then go to your last thought. Go to the experience that you may have just gone through, and more importantly, go back to what you know. And you have to know the truth, because that is what truly allows us to experience the freedom that life already brings and offers us. And last but not least, how we move forward from these states of being. I think far too often we adopt depression and anxiety as our own, and we have to recognize that they don't belong to us. They may be things that come to us in a season of our life, but they aren't part of who we are. And when we start to adopt these states of being, we start to become them. So we have to disassociate with depression and disassociate with anxiety in order to fully move forward. So we have to recognize that depression and anxiety are not our default spiritual dispositions. And when we do that, we are able to better choose the states of being we invite into our lives. Once again, we cannot adopt depression and anxiety as our spiritual dispositions, because when you start to identify with the thing, you welcome it in. And by welcoming in these things, you're only going to bear the fruit of these things. And once again, we want to bear fruit that is stemmed from truth, that stem from life. So I truly believe moving forward, whether you have dealt with depression, and I truly believe we've all kind of brushed up against depression and anxiety at one point in our lives. But the important thing is to first prevent it by choosing thoughts from the system of life. And if you find yourself in it, going back to that breath and going back to the truth and going back to what you know is so vital and so important. And moving forward is really staying in that knowing space, is staying in that space of, well, what is it that I know? And we have to know the truth. And when you know the truth, you are able to move throughout life really bearing good fruit, because that's what this is all about. When we think about the soul as being a womb, and what happens in a womb, we cultivate and nurture life, and we multiply life through that womb. So if you don't leave this installment of Life Club with anything else, I want you to leave with this. Understand that your soul is a womb, and whatever you deposit into your soul, you will eventually give birth to it. So when you are thinking about your meditation, when you are thinking about your thought life itself, always go back to choosing thoughts that bear forth good fruit, that bear forth a life that you would like to live. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into another installment of Life Club with me, Tashima Jones. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you were here with me, and for that I am truly, truly grateful. Be sure to stick around on TashimaJones.com for more videos, our 1 minute of meditation, how to join Life Club, and be sure to download my app, TJMtv. Until next time, remember your greatness. Talk soon.